Welcome, curious minds. Today, we're taking a deep dive into, well, one of the most intriguing stories in horse racing history. Think about this. A true champion, an absolute powerhouse, who was utterly unbeaten in every single race he ever ran. Now imagine, that same horse was never allowed to compete in the biggest, most prestigious races of his era.
It's a real paradox, isn't it? And our mission today is basically to unpack the legend of Maruzensky. He was a Japanese racehorse whose talent was just, well, undeniable. But his path was really shaped by the rules of his time. So we'll explore his dominant career, the surprising reason he was held back, and this lasting legacy that still makes people wonder, what if?
Yeah, we've gathered some fascinating insights, and you're about to hear why this horse, despite, having so few starts, is still talked about as one of the greatest. Okay, let's dig in. Our story really kicks off in 1974 in Hokkaido, Japan, with Maruzensky's birth. And this wasn't just any foal. His pedigree was exceptional, the kind that makes racing fans really sit up and take notice.
His sire was Nijinsky, a world-famous stallion.
Yeah.
And his dam Shill, she was an American mare, bought for a massive 90 million yen.
Wow, 90 million yen back then. That's a huge investment. Signals pretty massive expectations right from the start.
Absolutely. And even his name, Maruzensky, was, deliberately chosen. A mix of the owner's brand, Maruzensky, and his famous father, Nijinsky.
So the potential was there on paper? Did it show early on?
It definitely did. Even though he had this minor toe-out leg issue as a young horse, which they fixed, his talent was obvious. And his debut, autumn 1976 at Nakayama Racecourse, it was, well, spectacular.
Spectacular, how?
He went straight to the lead and just ran away from them. Won by a margin that was something like 2 seconds ahead of the runner-up. In horse racing, that kind of dominance, especially first time out, is just, it's not normal.
Not normal is right. And he kept winning easily, didn't he?
He did. He just seemed to outclass every field. But the race that really cemented his legendary status, I think, was the Asahi High 3-year-old Stakes.
Ah, yes, tell us about that one.
Okay, so again, he led from start to finish, wire to wire. But this time, the winning margin was an astonishing 13 lengths.
13 lengths.
Yeah. And he set a race record that stood for 14 years.
14 years. That's incredible.
It really was. And everyone watching, trainers, jockeys, commentators, they all basically agreed. This horse was just on another level.
So the stats back that up. What was his final record?
8 starts, 8 wins, undefeated. And he wasn't just scraping by. He beat his rivals by an average of 7 lengths per race.
7 lengths on average.
And his jockey, Seiichi Nakano-Watari, he had this famous quote that just perfectly captures it. He said, "I heard no sound from behind. No one was there."
Wow. That paints a picture, doesn't it? Just completely alone out front.
Exactly. It shows the kind of immense lead he consistently held.
It makes you think about the other horses of that time.
Well, yeah. There were actually some strong contemporary horses, like Lucky Ruler and Hard Bargain.
Yeah.
Genuinely talented horses.
Yeah.
But they were just completely overshadowed by Maruzensky's brilliance. They couldn't really shine.
So it wasn't that they were bad, just that he was exceptional.
Precisely. It just shows how one outlier talent can sort of reset the whole standard.
Okay, so here's the million-dollar question then. If he was this good, this dominant, why didn't he run in the Japanese Triple Crown? The Suzuki Show, the Derby, the Kikuka Show?
Well, this is where the story gets really frustrating. Right. It all comes down to a very specific and, well, frankly, unfair rule at the time.
What was the rule?
Despite being born in Japan, raised in Japan, Maruzensky was classified by the Japan Racing Association, the JRA, as a foreign-bred horse.
Foreign-bred? But he was born there. How does that work?
It was because his mother, Shill, the American mare, was imported into Japan just before she gave birth to him. And under the strict JRA rules back then, that specific timing meant the foal was considered foreign-bred.
And that label had serious consequences.
Huge consequences. It meant he was automatically banned from participating in those key classic races, the Triple Crown.
That's unbelievable. A horse of that caliber just barred from the biggest races.
His team obviously was desperate. They appealed to the JRA. They even offered things like foregoing prize money or taking an unfair starting gate, just anything to let him run.
And the JRA said?
No. The rules were the rules. They didn't bend.
So this rule affected others too, presumably?
Yes. It stayed in place until 1995. Another great horse, El Condor Pasa, faced the same barrier later on, for example.
But Maruzensky's case must have really highlighted the issue.
Absolutely. I mean, the original idea behind the rule was probably protectionist, to help Japan's own breeding industry grow without being swamped by imports.
Right. Makes some sense in theory.
But Maruzensky's sheer, undeniable talent, coupled with the public outcry about him missing the classics, really put a spotlight on the downsides of the rule. His case became a really powerful argument for why the rule needed to change. It showed how you could accidentally block your own best talents from the biggest stage.
And eventually the rule was changed.
Yes, thankfully. His story played a big part in that. Today, any horse born in Japan, no matter where its parents came from, can run in the classics. It was a major step forward for Japanese racing.
So his racing career, though perfect, was ultimately cut short.
Very short. He developed leg troubles, tendinitis, I believe, and he had to be retired quite young in January 1978. He's only 4.
Just 4 years old, 8 starts, 8 wins, an incredible but brief flash of brilliance.
Exactly. But thankfully, his story didn't end when he left the track.
Right. He went on to have a second career, didn't he, as a stallion?
A remarkably successful one, yes. Back in Hokkaido. His influence on Japanese breeding turned out to be immense. It showed his talent wasn't just him, it was in his genes.
Did he produce any major winners?
Oh, absolutely. He sired several champions. There was Harisky, who won the Kikuka show. One of the races Maruzensky himself couldn't run in.
Ah, the irony.
Right. And Sakura Chiyono, who won the Japanese Derby, another one. Plus Suzuka Koban, who won the Takarazuka Kinnin. So top-tier horses.
That's impressive. And his influence extended beyond his direct sons, I gather.
It did, significantly. He became what's known as a phenomenal broodmare sire.
Meaning his daughters were great producers.
Exactly. His daughters produced many, many famous horses, including, get this, 2 more Japanese Derby winners, Special Week and Winning Ticket.
Wow. So his impact just kept rippling through the generations.
Horses like Ishino Sunday, Kiwe March, Abukuma Polo, they all trace back to him through his daughters. It's a testament to the real power and depth of his bloodline.
What happened to Maruzensky himself in the end?
Sadly, his end was quite sudden. He collapsed during exercise in 1997. He was 23. The cause was heart failure.
A sudden end to a life that, on the track at least, felt unfinished.
In a way, yes. Despite only those 8 races, he's still revered. Truly seen as one of the greatest ever in Japan. Perhaps because of that what if.
What if he'd run in the Triple Crown? What if he'd stayed sound?
Those questions are inseparable from his legend. It makes you think about what truly defines greatness. Is it just the record book? Or is it also about the undeniable talent, even when circumstances prevent it from being fully proven?
Yeah, this story, Maruzensky's story, it really does remind us that sometimes the biggest legends aren't just about the victories. They're also about the dreams they spark and maybe the systemic barriers they expose.
Absolutely. His unbeaten record is amazing, no doubt. But maybe his bigger legacy is how he forced the sport to look at its own rules and eventually change for the better.
So thinking about this for you, the listener, what does Maruzensky's story really tell us?
Well, I think it pushes us to consider how we define potential and how we measure it. His talent was just there, obvious. But one rule, almost arbitrary from today's perspective, stopped him from potentially achieving a Triple Crown. A really powerful example of how external systems, sometimes even well-intentioned ones, can unintentionally put limits on, sheer excellence.
And that brings us to a final provocative thought for you to chew on. In any field, not just racing, how many genuine legends might exist whose full potential we never got to see? Not because they lacked ability, but because of external rules or circumstances, or maybe just bad timing. It raises a pretty big question about how we define greatness, doesn't it? And whether the systems we have in place truly foster it, or sometimes, maybe inadvertently, hold it back.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more. Check out our other videos for more stories you might enjoy.